And here we are. Jan, how you doing? Thank you kindly for taking your time and
Hello.
sitting down with us and talking about your game. So, with no further ado, who are you and what is Spellforce Conquest of EO?
Ryan, what the heck are you doing on my channel? My name is Jan Wagner. I'm the managing director of Owned by Gravity, and we have been known to do turn-based games. So the last game we did before this one was Fantasy General 2, and now we're doing Spellforce Conquest of EO, which is not, and I want to stress that, this is not the next installation of the Spellforce saga. So there's Spellforce 1, 2, and 3. This is not Spellforce 4. This is a spin-off. This is a side project where we go like, what about if we did Spellforce, which is a fantasy RPG RTS mixture? So that's sort of specific to Spellforce, very RPG RTS combinations. And we said, well, this is essentially role-playing game and tactical or strategical elements. So if we say this is the formula, why not try something else? So we are doing what I would call sort of a 4X RPG mixture. So there's turn-based tactical combat. There's a lot of RPG elements. There's a lot of story. There's like 700 plus quests that we have in the world, and there's 4X elements, but they're done differently. There's hopefully something that's fresh, because 4X has been around quite a bit as a genre, and sometimes, just sometimes, towards like mid and end game, they get a little like samey. They're more management than fun at that point, and we
hear your point. Yeah,
really have the sort of exploration, the initial phase when every decision counts, when really you're going like, oh, should I go this one? Like, I've got one unit. Oh no, there's an enemy. Like, when everything is really exciting. We wanted to keep this feeling and just move it throughout sort of the whole game, and that chimes in very well with the RPG element. So this is what we're doing. Spellforce Conquest of EO is 4X RPG.
that sounds super intriguing. I have a more in-depth question to that in a bit, depending on mid and end game and how to make it interesting and unique, especially with the RPG elements. But further down the road, where did the inspiration spark you to create a turn-based strategy game on the world of Spellforce? What was the give it there? Had you influence in the prior installments, Spellforce 1, 2, 3? Was there something from your hand?
Yeah, there's a personal connection there. I've been the producer on the first add-ons for Spellforce 1 back in the days, so 20 years ago.
What a jump!
I'm old. And I also did producing for Spellforce 2. I had my hand in Masters of War, which is a Spellforce card game that I wasn't even, like, until I started that project, I wasn't even aware that this had become a thing. This was a bonus thing in a collector's edition. So yeah, I've always had a connection to Spellforce. I felt strongly about the world, and we wanted to do something that really sort of does service to the world as well. So it's not just hey, let's slap an IP on something that we're not doing anyway, but it really gave us a chance to build something that is steeped in a world lore, and that kind of goes throughout the game. So yeah, there's a personal connection, and we were very lucky when we approached THQ with the idea, because it's not easy to give an IP to someone that says, well, we want to do this, but we want to do it completely differently. So yeah, they took a bet on us, and hopefully it paid off. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
I mean, I played it already a little bit off the camera in front of my YouTube audience, and dabbled around a little bit, and it feels. I mean, I'm just in the first 2 hours of the game, but it feels just overall exciting, as you said. At this first moment of when you begin your 4X adventure, where every little decision counts and is very intense. I felt that through the first 2 hours of the game constantly, and the storytelling, of course, was amazing. And I will leave it, though, to the audience to find out the storyline and storytelling. We're gonna dive into mechanical parts and see how the game plays and is at work later on in a little bit. How long was Spellforce Conquest of EO in production?
We started out a little optimistic, but by now it's going on, I think, 20 months. We are a very small team, so we're just 10 people, which for 4X title is not a lot, and the amount of content that we put in there, it's like we've got over 100 different units. We've got 70, 80 spells, at least I think over 80 spells, over 100 items. So it's a lot of stuff. So that for us was quite a lot of work to actually take take time for the balancing, do a very long close beta, and hopefully it paid off, because the game has improved so much from sort of the initial version that we had in mind in the months of polishing. So that was really valuable for us. But yeah, it took about 20 months for us to do.
That is actually quite a narrow time to produce it and throw it out, especially as a small team. I mean, I'm part of Footed Horse, and I know how time intensive it comes, especially before release, and the mid work, like mid and end work, is like the highest amount of work value that is coming out. Wow, big claps and kudos to that you pushed it out in this kind of time.
We have a very good team. I have very little to do with the day-to-day work on that. So it was an enormous like effort on parts of like everybody, like the storytelling guys, the designers were great. We have 2 programmers. They shouldered everything. So it really is like it's
a
very experienced team. So yeah, it really is a great team. So I'm happy to convey the kudos to those, because it's really their work to do.
Big claps to the team. Talking of turn-based strategy and 4X elements and whatnot, what does Spellforce Conquest of EO makes it unique if you now drag other games and you start comparison? Because you automatically start to compare with other games that you saw. Does it feel similar?
Everybody goes like, hey, this is like Age of Wonders, or this is like Heroes of Might and Magic and Masters of Magic. So there's a lot of elements of those games in there. Obviously, it's not something that we came up with. I think what's unique is it really blends, like role playing is an integral part. Like for us, role playing is a lot of like, it's interesting decision making them in character or making them contextual. But that's the same, like tactical games are also decision making. It's like, what, which unit should I build? Where do I go? How do I attack? This is all decision making, and this is for us, this blending this. I think we are further than a lot of the other games going into making this one thing. The other thing is we did something that very few 4X games do. We just said, well, you're not going to have a city. You're not going to have an empire. You're a mage. So this is focused about being a mage as an experience, which means you have one tower and you really tech into this tower. So there's rooms you can build. There's the rooms can then be kitted with other stuff. So it really is diving into this. Research is a part. We don't have a tech tree. We've got a spell book, and the spell book works slightly differently. It's not as reliable as a tech tree, because we didn't want the game to always feel the same when you play it. So even though it's very story heavy, the way you advance is very different from like the 3 mage archetypes you've got, or custom mage you do. That really influences the gameplay massively. It's you can play as a sort of Zerg-like necromancer type. You can go into an artificer, which I think we're gonna do, where you really tech into your very few, very valuable, very highly supplied units. So making a game that can be played in very different ways, and not just like, oh, this is a guy that has like 1 different unit and +5 on this and -5 on this. That was the first thing. The other thing is, we don't build empires. We've got the tower, and you'll have, there's a mechanic where you deplete your resources around the tower. So you suck out everything around the land, and then it's empty, which means you have to move on. And the tower is actually able to move. So your headquarter has to move on, and it has to go into different areas. And when you start out, obviously, you're in an area that's probably a little easier. So the further you go out, the better stuff you get, but the more dangerous it gets. Which means you're always going to do sort of the early game stuff of building up your thing, branching out a little, putting a little bit of control areas around your tower. And then you have to do it all over again in another place. That's more dangerous. At that point, you're leveled up, of course. So you've got new tools to use. And then, you can approach the same situation a different way, because you've got hopefully massively more ways to do it, and it should never get to the point where you go like, oh, another, like, that's my 32nd army and that's my 15th city, and I just do my building queues. There shouldn't be nothing automatic about it. You always need to take care about your decision making. I don't think it's totally unique to us. There's elements in other games as well of that. But the focus on this, I think, makes us very special, and tries to get away from something where everybody just assumes 4X is always going to be this. Like, this is always going to be the elements, and it's always going to run the same way. And our games really run a different way. Like, whatever you play, it's not going to be even some of the strategies that you have in 4X are not applicable necessarily like 1-to-1. So a lot of 4X people, when you start out, like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Blah, 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 send out my scouts. Oh, all my scouts got killed. Because it's an RPG as well. If you send a single party somewhere into a dangerous monster territory, they'll get killed. So there's new things. Hopefully, sort of a little breath of fresh air in that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I feel, I have to say, it is a really breath of fresh air in terms of turn-based strategy. I fell in love with, I'm a sucker for RPGs and storytelling, and I fell in love instantly. That is kind of like you being that mage in the tower, experiencing what happened to your former master. At least that's with the artifice. I'm not sure if it's with the other guys as well. The same arc.
The basic story arc is the same for everybody, because it's always about finding out about your master, finding out there's like the huge antagonist group, which is the Circle of Mages. They're actually sort of a historical faction not a faction, a historical factor in Spellforce. So they, if you know your Spellforce lore, I don't want to spoil it, you know what these guys are about to do. So this is your not even your enemy, that's your competition, because they're not taking cities. Like you're never gonna take a city, you're never gonna build an empire. They have their own interest. They like magical stuff, they like special resources, and so you get in competition, but it's not clear cut. You can always try to sort of help them a little or do their bidding, and then they'll keep you alone for a while, but ultimately you'll sort of probably get into conflict with one of them, at least. So that's kind of the story arc, but it starts out under this assumption, and then the tactical part or the strategical part of the gameplay, like who are you making your enemy, where do you go first, how do you approach that, that's kind of meshed with a story. So the story on a plot level is always going to be the same, but the way you reach to that end point, that's very different.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So is also smells like a lot of replayability, not only with the different classes, let's call them classes, that you choose, but also with the decision making down the road, and of course the strategical elements. And if that decision making that you take plays out, because I mean, you probably have to have the resources and units behind it to back your doings and what you want to do. But I'm excited. I want to jump in, but before we jump in and have a look at the game, I'm always interested when I have guests over here. What is you being part of the dev team, your proudest moment of the whole production, and now seeing the game finally out there? What is the touch of yours where you said, I did this, that's my doing, I'm proud of that?
I don't like to actually say what I've done, because I've been there for the initial inception. I think some of the concepts we have, which when we started out was like the tower, for example, like you're the mage, we're not gonna make a game that is about conquering cities or conquering the world even. You have a different level of interest. And when I wouldn't say that was my idea, but that was something that I was strongly interested in. That's something that I pushed for, and I think that turned out well. And that wasn't, I would say, until late project, that wasn't entirely clear. It could have gone either way. It could have also been quite boring or annoying, or you feel inhibited, so you can't really do what you want, and you want more building, and so there was a risk in that. And seeing this pay off, and seeing the first reactions from our beta testers and now from the public, that was really helpful, and that kind of was a great moment for me, because I was really afraid everybody would go like, you told us to do this. This is your fault. So yeah, great relief.
I'm here. I'm happy that you went for a fresh, unique approach, and I think it's paying off. And I'm gonna show the audience now why I think that, and we're gonna talk more about in-game stuff and show stuff from the game. And with no further ado, I'm gonna start a campaign. We have here the Alchemist, Necromancer, and Artificer. What's the difference between those three? Maybe just like dabble really quickly in their doings.
Yeah, Alchemist is mainly like there's always a difference. They've got spell schools and they've got a crafting class. The crafting class for the Alchemist is he can do potions and bombs and vials and all kinds of stuff which are usable in combat. So he's very flexible for in combat stuff. He's mainly oriented towards nature and that thing, plants. Necromancer can craft undead. So he can actually supply his normal armies with undead at the initially, and ultimately he can almost certainly play with just undead armies. So he's gonna swarm the map with a lot of armies, but he needs a lot of mana. So he's a very Like he's very focused in his gameplay. And he's an undead can't heal, so he's got a way to sort of always roll over new units. It's a very different approach. The Artificer is the guy that creates glyphs and magical items.
A runesmith.
And that means, yeah, it's a runesmith, exactly. And we can't call it runesmith for lore reasons, but that's essentially what it started out as.
I see.
So the Artificer is focused on fewer units, so he makes valuable stuff that you can actually connect to the units. So you have glyphs that you slot into them, and that means he can make a very few units very powerful. So it's a very different focus. So he's focused on smaller numbers of units, stacks that are very stable, and can really wipe the opposition with the right combination of rules. So that's kind of the three ways of playing.
Interesting. So the first one, from like a very shallow point of view, first one is kind of a flexible, do dabble in everything kind of thing. The second one is like zerg your enemies and just swarm them with undead. And the third one is kind of very specialized into certain units, upgrade them, and we're gonna see a little bit later on how upgrading works and experience gaining with them. It's super interesting. I love it. So, what kind of starting location shall we show off? I'm down with whatever you say. I would dare to say I'm experienced.
Okay, then let's go for Gilisher. Gilisher is like it's the same danger level as Mysticos, so it's sort of on a high end as a challenge on the starting location. But it's also got a lot of valuable stuff, and it's close to the mountains, which is good for the Artificer because there's a lot of ore there for your smithy.
We like them ores. Can you dig too deep?
And wake something. There is a storyline about something. There's a Silver Drift Hollow, it's called, which is a huge mine system that's actually visible in the map, where you can see there's been a lot of mining going on in the mountains. And there is a long quest chain about something that they dug up. It's not what you think.
Okay. Damn it. I thought maybe it's like a funny cool reference over there. So, in terms of showcasing, do you think balanced difficulty is good?
Yeah. Yes.
Good. Perfect. Gonna hop in. I love the art style. I love the whole look and aesthetics of it. It feels super good. Music is amazing. For the sort of interview, of course, we're gonna try to keep it down so they can understand us. It is also the point, Chad, where you can come in with questions that you have, and I shall redirect them to Jan. Make sure to tag me so it pops up in chat, and I know that's a question that you have towards Jan. And with no further ado, we are jumping into what is the most important things to look out for at the beginning of your journey.
It's initially the start is a relatively guided experience because we're trying to sort of ease you into the game, so it's a step-by-step thing. You shouldn't lose a unit early on, obviously, especially though for the Artificer, because you'll make your units valuable. You need to make them count. And you should actually be a little careful not to send out lonely scouts, which one of the things I mentioned that you have as a sort of a 4X game. You always go like, oh, this is a scout unit, just send it off. You can do that, but it's going to cost you the unit fairly soon. So always make sure there's an escort for your units.
Okay. So, let's have a quick look on the overview over here. We have gold as a resource, we have mana as a resource, we have mastery as a resource, research, and all fire. The first two are kind of self-explanatory. Mana you probably use to kind of cast spells and prepare spells that you can probably use on the map and maybe in combat, depending probably on the class that you use. Gold, of course, is probably your source of income to pay on things. What is mastery and all fire?
Mastery is two things. One gives you the amount of mana you can spend in a turn to cast spells. So the more powerful spells will take several turns, and the more mastery you have, the quicker you can get them, or you can even get them within one turn, several of them. It also gives you an idea about the minion range of your tower. So the more there's a threshold for certain mastery, I think 10 or 11. Yeah, I think you have to get more than 10, and then your tower levels up. And with the tower level up, you get new rooms to build on the tower. The domain gets larger. You can get more apprentices and can actually also get larger stacks. So it's kind of your progression throughout the game.
Oh, interesting. So
Allfire,
becoming a better
yeah, so,
mage, so to say,
yeah,
unlocks you like more abilities in buildings, units, and
yeah,
spellcasting. Cool. Okay.
yeah.
Going
So
forward,
that's kind
all
of
fire.
and yeah, Allfire is the sort of the source permeating the world. That's actually responsible for magic. So it's kind of the super magic resource. And later on, not initially, you can actually siphon off Allfire and then turn that into either mana or research or mastery. So you can control kind of where this Allfire might goes, and yeah, you can study it. Then it becomes research and shift it around. And Allfire is ultimately story-wise, it's very important because it's what everybody's after. This is what powers the greatest mages of the world. So when you control the Allfire, you really control magic in the world.
Mm. I mean, the storyline is all around the Allfire and the Circle of Magi, trying and understanding how to manipulate and dabble in that kind of thing. Oh, I saw you answer that question already. Maxmar asked if there might be a multiplayer in the near future for this.
I wouldn't say near, definitely. Multiplayer is not an easy thing. It's not there for release, let's put it this way, and then it depends on how well we are doing. And if we're doing well, then I'm sure people will be willing to give us money to do that. And then let's see.
Amazing. So what happened here is we are dabbling into the tower of our former master or teacher of magical dabblings, and we are having a flashback on what happened here, and are getting a little bit of an introduction to battle. Maybe you introduce us. Well, how does battle systems work here? I see here inner blue circle, outer yellow circle. I see yellow dots. I see numbers under a bar. I guess that's life points, and then different symbols for typing if there are, I guess, tanks, melee damage, and ranged guys.
Yeah, so the basic system is always you've got 3 actions. You can spend a maximum of 2 of them to move, and it's always going to be a movement range. So when you do one step, it's not counting like one step, one action. It's like in your first move, like with XCOM or similar games. You can also spend obviously the actions on attacks or casting spells or other stuff. There is what we call sort of a commitment system. So we are trying to speed up the combat a little, which means when you choose to attack, you'll always use all your actions. It's not going to be, oh, this guy gets one action, this guy gets another action. Like when you commit to something, you commit to everything. Which actually makes it a little more risky to do stuff because you're not as able to fine-tune it. But it also means it gets more interesting. The same goes for the enemies. Which we'll see now soon, you'll always have in melee, you always have a counter-attack. So when you attack somebody, they strike back, but it costs them action as well. Which means that action is not available for their attack in the next move.
Oh. So Ada has to decide if you want to attack and use all your moves and actions into attack. And as it says, there are 1 to 3 actions. So if you stand next to them, you'll use all 3 actions for 3 attacks, or use guard so you can defend yourself, etc., etc. Is there like systems that play like attack of opportunity if you move away from a stack?
Yeah,
amazing.
There's attack of opportunity. So when you see those yellow arrows around the units, which are currently in guard stance, this is the actual direction they're looking at. In guard stance, they're looking in every direction, but usually it's just the front 3 hexes. So you can do flanking if somebody moves
here
through these arrows. You'll get an attack of opportunity. If somebody runs away from you, you get an attack of opportunity. You also get flanking moves. You get higher ground. So the guys that use missile, for example, and shoot from top of the stairs, they would get an advantage. You've got range, which is quite important for missile, obviously. So there's all kinds of modifiers. You've got cover as well, and you've got, which is quite important. You did that right. There's 4 different damage flavors, like 5, which is elemental, physical. There is white damage and death damage, and elemental and physical go against armor, and white and death damage goes against willpower. And that's an important part because you can actually, willpower has a sort of a double function where people actually get modifiers when their willpower goes down, they lose morale, and it could ultimately mean they can run away, and you can actually work with willpower and fear and all these kinds of effects to demoralize an army and win without actually ever striking anybody. You can see that a lot of special abilities. It's a fantasy RPG thing, so there's guys burning now.
Definitely, Spellforce is very high fantasy. You can, I guess, I accept all kinds of creatures and things to be seen over here. As you said over here, with the being on guards, as I can see now, moving around, this does not trigger me attack opportunity, but if I do it with him, because of the front 3 tiles, this would trigger an attack of opportunity.
Exactly. And your first Phantom gets a flanking attack, so he gets a flanking bonus, and that also means he gets a free attack in the back, so without a counter strike. And because you're very clever, what you did now, you turned him around, so he gets to do his attacks, but that means the other guy now has a flanking attack. So this is one way to outmaneuver your enemy, and it's a great way for smaller units to attack, in a swarm, attack a large unit. So there's, even though we start off with very few units, there's quite a bit of tactical options involved already.
That is so in depth. Welcome, Raiders. So we have over here a little, what is this? Pyromancer T3 Dwarf Spellcasters. I enjoy how amazing they look like. Is there like the possibility to crits or do like extra damage except of the 36 to 45, or is it always exactly the numbers that are depicted?
That's kind of the range there. That's influenced by resistances, and then you I think casted and kindled on them previously, which means they are weakened to your kind of damage, because usually they got sort of a resistance to that. So that's kind of the modifier, but there's no crit per se, but there's a damage range, obviously.
I see.
And some of the attacks can do extra things like burn, and there's a chance, for that to happen.
Oh, so satisfying. That is so satisfying. And what I find interesting now is because we, as you explained it before, we put the golem over here in guard stance, and because he used all his action points to defend him from the attacks, now in my phase he's out of action points and cannot do any other special abilities and whatnot. So it's very cleverly set in the sense of strategizing how you position your units, what kind of abilities you use with them to, I don't know, read the room as good as you can and make the best out of the situation. And I guess that's kind of the emphasis and focus as the Artificer, because you probably won't have a lot of units, so it will be very costly, and you're focusing on making them very strong and unique in their abilities.
Absolutely.
So down the roads, do these units get experience? Do they level up? Do they remain? Because I see here T3 on the Pyromancer. Do they remain in their tier? Will they upgrade into more tiers and like evolve in their looks, or how does it work?
The basic unit level, there's like different tiers, which gives you sort of the initial power level that they're appearing. So you now have a very powerful stack, because we're doing a back sort of view back into what happened in the tower with a mage. So that's not your starting units. Every unit in the game can also level up, so you've got up to 15 levels every unit can reach, and they get on every level up they get a skill bonus, or a different like passive attack or something like that, or passive bonus. And every 5 levels they also get a special thing, like usually like an active skill to choose from. So every unit has its pool of skill upgrades they can get for the level, and it's randomly taken from that pool. So they get better over time, and you can also kit them out with glyphs and items depending on the type of unit.
Interesting. So there's also some sort of RNG going on at hand when you upgrade your units. Not always the same. I don't know. Ice Golem will be exactly the same as the other one because you were
exactly. So it's a limited. It's a limited pool. So it's not like there's like certain flavors that come with it. Like, I don't know, orcs are very good in enslaving people, and they have a lot of skills around enslaving people and making use of that, and optimizing their slaves in combat. So there's a flavor. Dwarves are very resistant, so there's a lot of resistance bonuses for dwarves, for example. So there's all kinds of these flavors, but within those pools, it's randomized.
I see over here also that they are sadly killed it, but they had like a sad face. Is there some sort of morale system at play, or what happened there?
The morale system. Yeah, the willpower stat that you have is influenced by seeing other people, like your comrades die in combat, or you can potentially obviously die yourself, which is bad for morale for everybody else. And if you do damage to your enemy, then your morale rises. So there's that. And then different morale levels give you different bonus. So you can be very happy or very, very confident. That will actually give you a defense bonus and a resistance bonus. You can be slightly desperate. You can be broken, which means that the unit will run away on its next turn, and you can actually be routed, which means you will actually leave the battlefield. So yeah, morale plays a role. Initially, not that important, but as I mentioned, if there's specific builds you can make with specific glyphs and specific units that can actually play on the fear of the enemy, that do more damage to enemies that are afraid, and that modify the enemy in a way that you rout them before you even need to get into melee with them. And there's obviously units that don't rout, like undead. They are fearless because they don't feel the pain.
So maybe a short introduction on what happened here story-wise. We are coming into the Mage Tower. Everything is like plundered, and we want to know what is going on, and what are we seeking here?
Exactly. So it's essentially what happened to our master's tower, and we find it plundered, and now we're about collecting the stuff. So we found tracks leading to the goblin camp. So we're assuming that probably some of the goblins, just stole stuff from the tower, and we're trying to get our master's stuff back as the first thing. And we now set up in the tower. So the blue area that you see is the area of influence for the tower. Within that area of influence, if there is a resource or anything, a building that generates something, you automatically
like this gold mine.
That. Yeah, like the gold mine, if it were inside you and it weren't occupied, then you would be able to profit from it.
Wow.
So that's kind of the area of influence. And also in your area of influence, you've got a bonus to combat because that's kind of your magical domain of power.
Okay, so it boosts you if you are fighting within your domain over here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because you're now controlling the tower, you can also do stuff within the tower. Maybe we can take a look at that, because
we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers that it can become probably. Yeah. Does it also visually become bigger and more impressive? Yeah. And wow,
of course, it's always about who's got the biggest one.
Of course. So what do we have here? We have the gold smithy, where we are crafting our runes, so to say, or our artificing.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love the art style.
You probably want to build. Yeah.
I love that. I'm not sure if I want to build this here, rather over here, taking gold per day and increasing my crafting slots, ultimately working into the glyph smithy, so I can make 2 smith actions.
Yeah, 2 glyphs at the same time, yeah.
But we're missing here some gold, so we're gonna keep that for now. Also, the inventory just tells us what we are having. Maybe let's wait about artificing and making runes once we have activated, and dive into that and what these little bubbles and colors mean. So with no further ado, they send us to go to the goblin camp, and now over here we have this roleplay at hand that I really love and appreciate. I replayed the Artificer 3-4 times just to see if the beginning is already like different, and even this meeting with the goblin camp, you have already some multitude of possibilities where you can, in this case, we can try to heal at them and not attack them. I had an option when I played it on the YouTube video where I could impress them using my magical abilities and make like an, I don't know, kind of a spirit, and they were afraid of it, and then a shaman joined me, and in this case, apparently, it's not happens. Maybe you can trade, but we want the money, so it's not gonna happen. We're gonna attack you. And what do we have as enemies? Some bandits. Let's go. Let's see. Do we have some questions from the from the chat? Drow ask, I have a question. Is the hero recruiting system randomized? I played an artificer and I had to choose between 2 necromancers, which I definitely had no synergies with my armies and my wizard.
That's your first apprentices that you choose from. This is random. Well, it's semi-randomized, so it has to do with the area that you're in initially. You also get a hero in the game later on, which is again randomized from a group of heroes. But the apprentice colleges or the arcane schools that you get your apprentices from, they're scattered throughout the land, so you can find others as well. And actually, undead it's not. That's I don't think you don't have any synergies with that because if you do that and you attack your undead, you can actually, if you find the right glyphs for that, you can actually make them heal. So that can be a powerful combination.
Fiend says, nice details with the game. What's the platforms available on for the game?
Currently, it's PC. So at the store of your convenience, wherever you get your good games from, as long as they're not pirated. So obviously, depending on how well we're doing, there's talks about console versions. You can play it with Steam Deck. You can play it with your gamepad if you want to. So that's already sort of convenient for these other platforms. But yeah, currently for release, it's going to be PC.
Oh, that is actually clever that we just had 1 AP to turn them around, and now we can attack them again from behind. Even though they had first strike, it did not count because it was a flanking attack first. And now they're disordered. Oh, that was actually super nice. Well played out. Ferris Animos asks, what are the future plans for this game? Oh, that's
World domination?
That's a broad that's a broad question. Let's see hypothetically it's running really good, sales are good, money's coming in. What can we expect? Future DLCs, more factions, more mages, Conquest of EO 2. Where's going the direction?
That's a very much future thing. I mean, first of all, yeah, if the game goes well, then obviously DLCs are on the menu. We do have more units, we do have more areas. So there's a whole map area with elves and dark elves that we haven't touched on yet. There's more stories to tell. We can also we don't have all the circle mages antagonists, so there's an opportunity, and new classes or new kind of mage types obviously would also be really cool. So we've got a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of stuff that didn't go into the game because, again, small team, limited time. So I'm sure if there's an interest, public interest, and people like the game, and people play it, and people buy it, then yeah, there's definitely plans, or there's ample opportunity for DLCs.
Mindless Destruction, yes, there was an attach on that option already. Depends on how well the game goes. They will see and dabble into multiplayer. I guess this could be a cool co-op multiplayer kind of thing where you can play together, each with their own stacks, doing their own thingies. Nonetheless, of course, depends on how well everything does. We're talking about experience and leveling up. We are lucky enough over here to see that the Gobos, I love their art style with their ears wiggling around. So you said they're getting a random pool, a drawdowns, and it's presenting you. Okay, it's presenting you 2 kind of options here. Let's give them more life. Make them a little bit beefier, even though that's a weird thing for goblins. And then we have over here pack tactics for each ally with this +1 damage. Oh. That might be helpful in the future. You know what? Let's invest into this. And with that, our first turn is done. We see here some creatures at play. Wow. Ha!
That's going to be interesting. That's what I mentioned when we started out. For everybody who's coming later, I sort of warned that this is a starting area that's quite challenging, and we've just seen why, because this is very early in the game to be attacked by these guys, especially if you've got wounded goblins. But I think we can try and do that.
Okay.
I don't think we're without chances yet.
Let's do it. Let's try it. Maxmar asked, how many people worked on this game, and did you crunch before release?
Yeah, we're 10 people, so we're a small team. Well, I wouldn't say crunch. I mean, some of us worked, like, we played a lot. And that's kind of extra time. So yeah, that's something where you should definitely go behind the barriers, because these guys have a lot of movement and they'll come at you quickly. And you want to get off as many shots as you can and minimize your exposure, because they are more than you. So you need to take them out before they get to you.
So let's see here.
So, yeah, probably even further to the right would be a good idea. Like
Over
there's a row of barriers over there. Yeah, that's where you want to be.
Okay, then. Let's stack our positions over there. They probably can just fly over it, right?
They can fly over it, but if they attack from the other side, they can't attack from the other side. So they have to actually go around you, which will help you a little.
Let's place you up here as cannon fodder. And you as a protection from the flank.
Also, I think your minion has a bit of physical resistance, if I remember correctly, so he's not as squishy as the goblins are.
We're not reaching them yet, so we're gonna wait here and let them come. I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Maskmaraz, did you use a custom engine to build the game?
We did use Unity, so it's, we have our own kind of tactical framework, so we have a couple of things that we built for Fantasy General already that we've kind of reused, but most of it is fresh and yeah, the engine is good. Okay, now
versus the
take
damage
one
time.
of them out, I think. Yeah.
We're gonna use the potential of doing full damage here. Let's hope for the best. Oh, nearly.
Well, they're burning, which means they're gonna die next turn. Probably before.
You reckon should we be aggressive here and try to bind them?
No. They'll swarm you and they'll kill you. That's the only thing you get from that. You actually you can block them there quite nicely. So I would honestly just let the goblin defend. I know it's not heroic. He's gonna fall anyway.
Should we throw them in to bind them in this area so we have more chances to shoot around?
No, because they'll attack you from up there, and then the other guys can go around. This is actually a perfect place you're already in.
Good. Let's hope for the best. I'm gonna also protect. And let's see what happens. Very good. They burned away. As you said, they cannot attack over the barrier, so we're good on that, at least for a turn. Do not be attacked over here. Oh my. Confident.
Yeah.
Even though they're getting swarmed.
Well, because you're doing more damage to them than they are doing to you, because you got your defense, and that there's a 20% defense bonus, and that always applies for every attack, even if you can't counterattack it. So starting out, that's a good decision. You should actually try and, yeah, exactly, take those guys out, but that will mean you get an attack of opportunity. So if you use your goblins to, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't want to backseat, but
do it. So good. So
quite dangerous.
If I move over here, I get into the zone, but not necessarily getting an attack of opportunity. But
you need your goblin to attack the weakened one, because that will just take one attack from your goblin and it'll kill it. And it'll still protect you from the other guys, and then you can shoot one of them.
Exactly.
Excellent. And then you can.
Question is, should we kill off the guy, or should we do damage on the other one?
No, it's actually you can kill. I think
you can kill
any of them. Yeah, because they are weak to elemental damage, and your guy's doing elemental damage. This is what we talked about this kind of the damage resistance stuff.
Exactly.
That comes really handy here.
Perfect.
So already you've killed 3 of them, and they just got 1 of you. And I'm thinking the gobbo will survive their attack, hopefully, because they need to spend time to actually get to you. And so you get out. Excellent. Okay.
Kill them off and shoot them off.
Oh!
There we go.
Cool. See, this is how you battle.
Wow, I mean, squeezed my butt cheeks, I have to say.
Yeah. No, this is what we like. This is a combat where obviously, if you look at the sheer numbers, like they outnumbered you, they've got a higher total combat power. But by clever positioning, by using their weaknesses, by strategically sacrificing a unit to block their approach, you made it, and you made a decisive victory out of what would have been a much less comfortable win.
I hear you. Now, is it Jan is providing a +3 bonus attack on Coremaker's gameplay. That's why we're winning here. And is the story progression tied to what you do on the map, tied to building up your tower, tied to your research? When Like, what does trigger the movement going forward?
So the game has its own clock ticking. So there's a sort of world progression that happens independently of you. That is just dependent on your difficulty level, actually. So depending on the difficulty level that you play on, it's faster or slower. But you have to keep up with the world. If you don't, then at some point the world will overtake you. But of course, you can also play faster than them and be ahead of the world.
Ooh, even 2 level ups because they were so...
Yeah, because the experience are shared among the survivors. So if you lose a unit, it's not going to take away that experience. So the combat experience is going to go to the people that can. And since the minions are a fantastic unit, but they are summoned, which means they don't get experience. They're kind of a magical construct.
Oh.
So all the experience went into your goblin.
That's amazing. Oh my, oh my. So let's hop into the tower and have a look at the Grimoire, aka the, let's call it the research hub. I found it very interesting that it's sort of like tapped into different spells or masteries, so to say. Because being an artificer, I guess it's focused all around earth magic and I see your sniff gold. I love this already. I love the roleplay aspect over here. It's kind of like digging into the notes of your master and trying to decipher the book that he wrote. And by doing so, you yourself become more and more powerful and have more access to all kinds of spells. Like over here, Corrode. The armor of all units targets stacks lords of their physical defense. And that is a world spell. You throw that at a stack and it all gets corroded before you attack them. Super good. Sniff gold.
So what we have, which is a little different than other games, we actually the mage only does world spells. So there's always, you have a lot of magical units that can do stuff in combat, but this is the units, and your mage is kind of the guy behind, like the power above, and he can always influence everything on the world. You can also attack, use stacks in the world and cast stuff directly on them, like this one, which is weakening others in combat. But you're always kind of a little like removed because you're sitting in your tower. You're not going to involve in the nitty gritty of killing things or people or whatever.
So we also got
you're a scientist
now access to a few glyphs. This is how the upgrade works. Giving them certain glyphs unlocks them certain abilities like mine ores. I've seen that these fellas over here, the artificer minions, do already have the world skill mine ore, and also the skill mountaineer, that they can traverse mountains and cliffs. Like any mountain? Is there like no boundary for them at all? They can just like...
There's no mountain safe from them. They can get anywhere.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Good, yo. I think we're gonna wait here for a turn to heal. Because I also saw that if you are in your tower, unit regeneration daily is 100%. So taking a nap in here definitely helps on the healing parts. And we have 3 more turns until the Goblin Shaman is done. I did not think that we're gonna lose units already, so...
Again, I have to apologize because I kind of made you go into this area knowing that it's going to be too dangerous. But you did really well. You lost just 1 unit, which is kind of the operating term. You could have lost everybody.
Oh, that's true.
The game is actually, I mean, it's geared towards beginners, obviously, so it's not as dangerous from the beginning. But depending, as I said, on the area you're starting in, there's already quite a challenge, and you did quite well. You just snuck that and grabbed it and then went out. You do want to build your artificing thing probably sooner or later, but yeah.
Yep.
So this is now an introduction with the circle. So there's another thing happening. Like you slowly piecing together what happened in the tower, and you find out that not only do the goblins steal stuff from you, but then they tell you afterwards, because you saved the goblins now from the human raiders. You can actually hire the goblins, but you also find tracks leading into hamlets. So some of the stuff of your master's laboratory has been apparently brought to that village. So you can go there and ask them about it.
See, 2 more turns until that isn't under construction. Oh, I can do multiple buildings at once. That's actually
yeah.
So
as long as you can afford them, you can build everything.
Definitely. Cool. Navi says humans are really the bad guys. We need a form of dwarf goblin alliance for mutual defense. Totally, will understand that. Is it the universe of Spellforce? This typical kind of beef between pointy ears and dwarves?
I don't like Spellforce. While it has all the fantasy races or fantasy tropes, is a little different because there was a war of 6 races, which kind of was a big thing, where the orcs, the dark elves, and the trolls fought against humans, elves, and dwarves. And since then, the friendship between like the light races has intensified. So they are not like, it's not Gimli versus Legolas. Having said that, they've got different interests, let's put it this way. So yeah, they might not be aligned on everything.
So we go into the hamlets, and well, we're with dwarves, you not necessarily need them harm. And I see we are offering a bit trade. Of course not, fool. Yeah, trade. Let's perform.
Yeah, they find it hard to believe that because you're a powerful mage, they are obviously afraid. So of you being mistreating them in some way. So they take a little to convince them that you actually mean well. You could also, if you're a necromancer, you could not mean well. If you're any mage at that point, there's a good example of we don't have a morality in the game. There's no good or evil. Like there's obviously evil deeds or good deeds, but we're not sanctioning you for playing. Like you could have enslaved the whole village, for example. You could have gone out where like, you give me stuff and I'll take all your men and make them into workers and enslave them. And that would have made the village very unhappy. So that's a consequence, obviously. But we're not judging you. And you can be very nice, which also we're not rewarding you for that necessarily. So it's not always the best way of going like, oh, there's a classic role playing. There's always like, oh, there's 2 stupid options and 1 clever one, and that's the one I'll take because there's always a right one. There's not a lot of right or wrong choices. It's just there's different choices.
I hear you.
Depends
I
on
love
the
it.
style of play.
Exactly, it depends on how you approach your story in that case, because you're like role playing your magician and how you think he will act, you act, and then the world reacts to it. Love it. So we're gonna perform a cantrip and we're getting some resources in, as you said. The village, or aka an undiscovered faction, is trying to like us.
So this is you paid a little mana. This is your -5, and for the cantrips, and then the factions in the game, like every region has a major city that sort of the region belongs to, and these are factions in the game. There's also like free floating factions that run around, but mostly it's about the cities, and the faction influence unlocks things that you can buy in the city, and it also unlocks quest chains that are specific to that city. So the more they trust you, the more stuff they will sell to you, and also the more things they'll entrust you with to do. And there's ultimately in every city there's like a maximum that unlocks something really cool.
There we go. We have the guild smithy now finally instructed, and now we can have a look at another aspect, and actually main aspect of this class, artificing. How does it work?
So with Artificer, you always have to have an ore. So there's always a metal base that you have it on. There's different tiers of ores. There's sort of more valuable ones that can do different things. With a basic ore like mountain copper that you have they can do sort of lesser glyphs, and then with better you can do even cooler glyphs. Then you always have essences, and there's always that threshold. So there's like elemental essence, for example. Have 3 in your combined, and that reaches a certain threshold. If you had like 3 elemental and 3 arcane, that could create a different rune. If you only 3 arcane, it's a different rune again. So every time you do something and you cross that threshold, there's a new rune that you discover that you can inscribe on the glyph, and that will produce different glyphs with different results.
Will the artificer remember what kind of glyph you produced with what kind of combination? Okay,
yeah, so on your left, there's after you craft your first recipe, once you crafted something, that's always going to be in your recipe chain. And later on, actually, you can also craft other things like books or weapons or shields for your heroes.
Exploited by burn. Nice. Question is, does the fireball of our guys over here inflict burning?
That's an elemental attack, yeah, and they can do burning damage.
Can apply burning. Okay, so that is a good combo over there, and a cheap one as well that we can go for the sake of showing off. So we're gonna use a fur and some ashes, and we're getting the lesser glyph of fire wielding. Takes 2 turns to be crafted. There we go. Amazing. So we also have now our shaman at the ready. Is it a wild tactic with the artificer to split off the artificer minions to start digging around with nearby nodes?
As you've seen, they because they're relatively resistant to damage. I wouldn't take them off quite yet. Later on, yes, you can send them off to mine ore because they're quite good at that. But there's enough stuff, like there's these packages to be found, and I currently wouldn't have them run into the wilderness alone. This, for example, this is a good thing because the plant over there to the left, that's a dwarven windweed something, and that renews your movement. That's pumpkins. If you could harvest plants, like the alchemist minions, for example, can harvest plants, then you couldn't make use of those. Otherwise, you need workers to do that for you. But yeah,
or
the other one,
also a
there,
glyph that might give you, because
or a glyph that gives you that, exactly.
There we go. The mounted ghost gives you minor work.
Yeah, exactly. The glyphs can make your units into something that usually they couldn't go. Yeah, so the herbalist can make you harvest plants.
I think that's a good thing for in shaman. Sounds like something he would do.
Yeah.
There we go. Means we can now go over here and start harvesting. How long does it take to harvest the thing?
4 turns. If you have more units that can harvest at the same time, then the time goes down usually. Or 3 turns, I think, in this case. Depends on the plant. I think harvesting 3 and
4 turns.
Or mining is 4. Yeah, 4 turns. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So overall, we have a complex system at play, followed around a mage and his story, building up his Mage Tower. You don't have your typical kind of, you have your main base built up, like, I don't know, let's grab Civilization, where you build up your town and expand your reach. You use what you have at play. You try to leech the resources and everything that you need for your research, for becoming the Grand Master. What is the ultimate goal in Conquest of EO?
Well, it's to become the greatest mage of your world, essentially. Although there's the circle of mages that beg to differ, so you need to find a way to either get them off your back or join them ultimately.
Okay, so ultimately either become super badass mage or try to become part of the circle and appease the other competitors. We have different classes. We have all kinds of different magical creatures, races, factions at play. Is there also like some sort of diplomacy at play? Because we saw this kind of them liking us now because we traded with them.
There's not diplomacy as in terms of I give you gold so you like me more thing. There is there's always what we call diplomacy of action. So depending on what you do, they like you more or less. Overall, with your progression, it's going to be harder because they really don't like you getting, uppity. So the more powerful you get, the less they start to like you. But you can do stuff. They'll come to you and they'll ask you for things. Sometimes it's going to be conflicting things. Like one mage asks you to do something against another mage, and then you can decide, who you're going to piss off. In general, there's friendlier and more aggressive mages. So some of the guys are really, getting on your toes immediately, and some of them are more, they have goals like world peace, for example. One of them, Area of the Light, wants world peace at any price. So that's different things. So that's what we call diplomacy of action, and the same goes for cities. If you kill monsters in the vicinity of a city, the city will like you more for it. So you're cleaning up, their backyard. Yeah. If you do quests for them, they will like you more. If you start to, for example, use a spell that, let's say, creates units out of the city's area, where you just go like, oh, I want these guys, I want to levy somebody, or I want to create undead from, a human settlement, then they like you less. So again, diplomacy of actions.
I enjoyed this whole pack of new fresh air into the turn-based strategy era in 4X, and I hope you do too. If you want to go further and have a look at it and wishlist it or buy it, link will be in the description down below of the video later on for the future audience. Hello there, future people. And also for everyone here in chat right now, it's in the chat. And with that, Jan, I see, thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
Thank you
Thanks for
for
having me on.
creating an amazing game, Spellforce Conquest of EO. Go check it out.